certainly making a mess of me. I don't know if that's going in right. All right. So we're 9 seconds in. Get this out of the way for starters. This is a new way I think I'm going to try to format these when I do these lives. This is a watch along. If you want to watch this with me, you're welcome to. You have to have your own copy. For copyright reasons, I cannot play this all the way through for everybody else to watch with me. But as I go forward, I may do a series of these where I do my review reaction at the end with a few of the in-series reaction before the opening credits. I think that's probably the best format for me going forward. I may do a few attempts at a more as I react, but I think the format I usually tend to follow along with is I'm not much of an emoter when I'm reacting, so I may make a few comments throughout this story as we go, but my overall take is usually given as the credits roll. So I think that's probably what I'll end up doing. But with that out of the way, tonight's movie is Star Trek Beyond. I have a DVD copy that I got at the dollar store. This is part of the reason why I ended up deciding to do this series. Because I knew as an old, I don't know what the term for it is. I'm not a Trekkie per se, but as an old sci-fi geek, I had some predispositions towards Trek as it used to be, and I had this preconception of the new ones as being Hollywood movie remakes as action adventures that just got rid of a lot of what made Trek for me. But I need to give everything a chance. I can't assume it's all going to be tough or bad material just because it's not what I'm used to. So I figured I would at some point have to get around to retrying trying these for the first time. But I was reluctant to. And then I found the copy of Star Trek Beyond for $1. And I said, all right, well, I'll add that. But I can't really walk in, on the third of a trilogy. And so I've got to watch the other ones. And I should probably do that for my channel as a reaction. So I've been a little picky about it. And I'm popping it in for the first time. Hopefully it works. If it doesn't, I'm going to have to scramble to do some, find a replacement for it for an online copy. But with that in mind, let's see if it'll take the CD, DVD, or whatever it is. I don't even know if my computer plays movie DVDs. I've never done this before on this computer. Okay, DVD drive, Star Trek Beyond. Play DVD movie. Will it do it? Continue. Media player is working. Oh, okay. So I got to give you the countdown for it. Hang on. Okay. We might have some previews beforehand. I've never done one of these live as a DVD reaction, so bear with me. I will do. Let's just roughly go with 3, 2, 1, go. I will hit play. And it looks like I'm getting. Looks like it's working. Just the generic noise in the background that it uses. It's like this is not audio keying anything. I don't know if we're doing previews or not. Alibaba Pictures. Hua Media. Geez, how many of these pre-movie things do we need? Bad robot. Are we gonna give us something here? Oh, there we go. It's the Enterprise. No previews. Straight into it, I guess.
I'm appearing before you as a neutral representative.
Okay, and the sort of comedic start is good. Yeah. Yeah, they don't. Each of these does seem compartmentalized. There's not a lot of overlap so far between the consequences between movies. They tidy it up at the end and they start fresh each time. So it really does feel episodic. I gotta say, no offense, but the actor who does Bones, he doesn't feel real. I don't buy him as the character. I mean, he has a point. It's not enclosed in anything other than that field around it. You pop that bubble and everything, all the water turns to both ice and steam in one go. Everybody in the open air dies as the air shoots out in all directions. Like, at least have some kind of enclosures. This is it's aesthetically pleasing, but trying to make it feels like it's been 2 weeks since the last one. Maybe it has. I don't know if I've been paying attention as not as much as I need to. But feels like they're taking longer to get to the premise of the movie. Oh, he's passed. Taking a really long time to set up the episode conflict. No, there's unknown and then there's unknowable. There's no unknowables, but there's plenty of things you don't know. There's nothing in space that's quite like that. Even the rings of Saturn, there's so much difference distance between objects in the rings of Saturn that yeah, nothing looks like that. Yeah, you might want to take evasive maneuvers. Was it a Wilhelm? This looks vaguely familiar. What was that? Well, I think that's pretty much the end of the Enterprise as is. You've already lost half your crew, and the structure of the ship is in 5 pieces. Abandoned ship is. It's in armor. Did you really punch a guy in armor in the head and expect him to go unconscious? That's an absurdist concept. He gave the piece to her. The thing he's after is no longer there. He put himself inside a torpedo casing. Nice. They're in armor. Punching them in the head is useless. Oh, geez, Louise. No, I'm led to believe that one of the cast actually died after or during the shooting of this. So I wonder if this is a way they could use to write him out. That's a hell of a ride, Scotty. Oh, geez, man. That's a tough spot to be in. So we had Enterprise escape ships. We had a piece of the saucer the non-saucer section. You had a couple of the alien pods. Interesting. Go Doc. I'm feeling a little lightheaded myself after that. Jeez. That was good. Oh, that's a little excessively stupid. Like, they couldn't tell the person who was right in one spot didn't suddenly vacate that spot and find somewhere else to be. Just the sheer amount of tech and materials on the saucer section would make it super valuable anyway. What's fascinating about it? That's the thing I don't like about this characterization of Spock. There's nothing fascinating about it. It's a swarm of fucking bugs in a cave. Stop acting like it's intellectually stimulating. This is written by somebody who pretends at intellectual stimulation. USS Franklin. If the crew abandoned ship, oh, thanks for that. Okay. To what degree does this mirror the thing that happened in the beginning? Somebody who feared peace offering as a sign of aggression. Nope. Just shoot her. Just shoot her. It's supposed to be a view screen, not a windshield. Oh, you gone practically vertical at that point. Congratulations. Space vampires? Okay, sure. That was hasn't gotten there yet. That's not right. What the hell is this crap? You gotta let it go, Captain. She's not your ship. Oh, God, please. It just means we're gonna get a motorcycle scene later in the. Oh, God, he's not gonna be happy you used an antiquated transporter. You're asking an awful lot for her to just suddenly accept bunches of you on board the ship. That's a little creepy. That's a shit thing to say. You're gonna get her killed. That's not a logical argument. The stupid frickin' motorcycle. Such a stupid thing. All right. I'll let it go. That's an asinine weapon. Certainly seems like you're using all of her tech. If we don't get more backstory on these guys, then I'm going to be very disappointed. You introduce an enemy for the first time and make them nothing other than just an enemy for the first time, and you eliminate them. That was tried too hard for that. That's a hell of a ride. Okay, whatever. I mean, this thing has been crashed and been absorbed into a mountain range for a couple hundred years. That's stupid. Counting on it. Oh God, that stupid music. God. So cheesy. I'm tempted to look at this and see if Abrams did this one too. '57. Oh please. Oh, surfing. You have got to be kidding me. You you destroy the Franklin. Why would he continue down this tunnel and not break out one of the side panels? If he's in the they certainly make some tense scenes. Slap. He's gonna kill that new girl. Starts with a J. If you do that, I'm gonna be pissed. It's not the only way. If you build a system that takes care of a whole system like this, a whole station like this, you don't have one way in and one way out. Because if that one way in gets broken, you don't have access to it. Just beam them out, for crying out loud. You're able to drop people on one of the alien ships. Why wouldn't you be able to snag this dingus from the center of the tower? Yeah, yeah. Did this once before. Oh, please. Like he's gonna suddenly change his mind now. It seems like every episode of this series we have hundreds of people die and get. Paris. The new Enterprise? Oh, it's the advanced ship that they were building. It wasn't quite ready yet. Okay, gotcha. Okay, it wasn't J.J. Abrams. Written by Simon Pegg. I should not be bad mouthing it then. I have a lot of respect for Simon Pegg, but oh, produced by J.J. Abrams. Ah, this is this is a this is a tough one. I had a lot of hopes for this one, and honestly, I feel like the second one was better. This one was okay. There was this feels, you know what? I think the thing that gets me about this is this doesn't feel like a Star Trek movie. This feels like a it's going to sound jerky to say it, but it feels like a first season The Next Generation two-parter. It it feels like it's there are pieces of it that just like it needed to bake longer, I think. And it's hard to really place where the problems for me were. There are some very obvious ones where like, ooh, we've got a motorcycle for no freaking reason. Let's just have it in there. Well, it's not for no reason because we put this motorcycle in there because we need him to be riding it like a hot rod vehicle in the second half or the third part of this story. And it's like there were other things you could have done for that thing. And then like the rock and roll music for the sole reason that you were going to bring it back later. Like I have a hard time with that kind of stuff where you introduce it just because you want it to be a part of a cool scene later and you don't integrate it fully with the idea of the setting and the story. Um, the surfing the giant wave in space. I'm sorry, but that's stupid. Surfing to rock music in space. Like the pieces that got you there, you could use it in the right way. I just feel like it was, I don't know. And I come back to the idea over and over again that it's entirely possible that the problem isn't the movie. This isn't a movie that's made for me and my Trek fandom. This is made for somebody else. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful tone. I just feel like to a certain degree this was made for a different Trek audience. And I think that comes down to the idea that, wow, this music is really distracting. Like, I think that's part of the other thing is this isn't Trek music to me. And I feel like potentially what the problem is that thing that I was anticipating coming into this trilogy of movies is there. It's just not there in the way I thought it would be. So the events that they set up in this movie were set up to make an action thriller movie of the box office boom kind. And Trek has never been that for me. Trek started as a series of thought-provoking story. It started as a space western, honestly. It's what was it? Roddenberry phrased it to the execs at the industry about. He said something to what is it? Bonanza in space or something like that. It was like a western, because at the time when they came up with Star Trek, the western stories were all the rage on TV, and so they pitched it as those western style stories in space. But Roddenberry squeezed in a whole lot of other things into those stories. A way of an optimistic future about technologically progressed humanity and a diplomatic exploration of space. I mean, as much as Starfleet when it started was the naval arm of the Federation, a navy like that is quasi-military. So I mean I get it. Like they're equipped with weapons and they go out and they confront any more hazards that are out there in space. But to a degree, the premise of those stories was learning something new, discovering something about out there and in here in humanity. And in the process of doing that, those stories, you had conflict that came about, as any natural storytelling has a conflict that you have to work through. Otherwise, the story is not interesting. But I feel like the story as it's arranged in these movies is more about the traditional, I want to say, like, it's not really quite the only thing, but the only way I can think to describe it is like a Schwarzenegger Lethal Weapon kind of action sequence. Now, it's not to say that they didn't try to include an overall message. Like, that's the thing that Trek oftentimes did in its episodes, which I don't think you see a lot of in the Trek movies before this series. Was in the Trek episodes, you had the moral lesson of the episode. And this has some of that. But I feel like the Trek movies were oftentimes a little bit like they still had moral lessons too, but they were more along the lines of re-embracing the feel and the groundwork that the series laid. And this isn't leaning on the groundwork that the series laid. This is full tilt, just episodic movies. Like every movie has a series of events that seem disconnected from all the other movies. And they've distanced themselves and stepped away from the existing movies and series that were out there. And so they seem to reiterate that distance in every one of these movies while also making the movies episodic like a TV series, episodic like a TV series. Where like at the end of this movie, everything goes roughly back to normal. So you're not actively beholden to any consequences going forward. Now, the new character introduced in this one may be an idea for somebody to show up in a future one that's probably never coming at this point. So, like, that new character might be introduced again. Ambassador Spock is dead, and the planet Vulcan has disappeared. Those are still lasting consequences. But by the same measure, everything else was tidied up at the end of the episode so that you go roughly back to normal, so that you re-emerge into the idea of whatever next movie came about didn't have to worry about whether or not you'd seen the previous movies. So of these three movies, we have the distinct feeling that in the next movie, you could sit down to movie 4 in the series and never have to have seen 1 through 3 to take off again from that ground. And Trek, the movies of the original series, weren't like that in a large sense. There's still an overarching sense of a universe that's built for stories to exist in that you could delve back into the lore and explore. And I feel like this is built for a lot of punching, fighting, shooting, jumping, explosions, an bad guy of the season or a bad guy for the episode who's eliminated at the end of the episode. And that's like, that legitimately feels like that was the whole point. And like, it's a bottle in the TV series, that would be a bottle episode. And the movies feel like bottle episodes of a TV series. And the bottle episodes aren't about any other lore of the setting. They're all about the lore that's built within the episode itself. So like the SS Franklin or whatever ship they discovered, like, where's the lore for that coming from? Like, there was no setup before that. Like, nobody was talking about in movie 1 or 2 the lost ship, the Franklin. Nobody was talking about that. And nobody talks about who her the new characters nobody talks about her species, where they came from, what happened to them. Like, she's off the planet now. Like, she has the ability to go contact her own people. None of this is like, there's no depth past the surface for this, is what I think I'm trying to say. Like, she didn't exist for there to be lore or world building involved. She exists for the sole purpose of being the support character for this episode. And she's an interesting character. I kind of wish there was more about her people and what was going on. But it's just like, and I think that was the problem for the previous two movies. And I maybe that's my takeaway from this. It's not overly philosophical, because one of the things about a Trek episode of the TV series or the old movies is, geez, they had a tendency to be philosophical about certain topics. The closest thing they have to philosophical in this topic is the captain of the Franklin was an old soldier in a non-military organization where soldiers didn't have a place anymore, he felt like. And when he crash landed on a planet, his drive to continue to survive and his being trapped on this planet in isolation, he went mad, and he wants a return to war and destruction. Where is that? Like, I mean, if you want to explore the idea of what happens to soldiers when they're put in a position where the purpose they've dedicated themselves to is no longer interested in having them anymore, that's a topic you can discuss, explore, and whatnot. But it's so shallow. Like, on this particular movie, it's such a shallow delve into that topic, because it's like you don't ever get a real exploration of the mental place that the character went through. It's introduced in the same way that the motorcycle was introduced. It's introduced because it gave you permission to use that as a key factor at a later scene. Like, it's literally the only purpose for the villain to be a human captain who went mad, used an alien technology, and wants to bring war is because that's the excuse you had in your mind for why he's doing what he's doing and why he's attacking the Federation and not just anybody else. Like, that's the explanation for why that's happening that you came up with. And so the justification was to introduce that bit of information earlier on. And I feel like that's the wrong way to introduce a concept like that. And Star Trek did a lot more, like the Next Generation TV series and the original Trek, Deep Space Nine, even Voyager. And I've only seen a couple seasons of the Enterprise TV series, and I have not seen the newer one. I forget the name of, Destiny or something like that. But they don't do that. They build their stories around the philosophical concept, not the action sequences and the big battle at the end, the climactic confrontation. And then they build into that confrontation a story element based off of some supposedly thought-provoking idea. Like, you've built the conflict first, and then you put in a link to a thought-provoking idea that you don't fully explore in the full sense of it. Like the scene at the beginning where Kirk is standing in that room full of the little alien dog people who are terrified that this device is a stolen artifact that's a sign of thieves who will murder them in their sleep. Like, that whole sequence, I was looking for and hoping for it to be a beeline narrative of the overarching concept of this movie, where it's a concept of somebody who's outlived the role they had as a solver of conflict, feeling as if they've been robbed of purpose and the rest of society doesn't appreciate the function of that purpose now that they've found other ways to do things. Like that, the proper use of a B thread in a story is to mirror that without necessarily clearly obviously mirroring that. So that the conflict at the beginning, instead of being played for a joke of ripping Kirk's shirt and negotiations going badly and kind of illustrating why he just doesn't want to deal with crap like that anymore. Like that was a throwaway. That sequence was wasted and should have. I'm being a little harsh there, but that sequence was wasted on that joke sequence and should have been like, it's almost like Trek benefits when it's being done as an essay on a topic. You start with your opening, you propose your argument, and then you do through the series of the rest of the body of the work examples and illustrations of the premise that you proposed in your opening. And they don't do that. Their opening was a throwaway joke. They're not making any necessarily narrative arguments for any of the rest of the body of the work. And they propose towards the end of it justifications for the conclusion of the movie. They're not working at a proposed stance that was set up beforehand. And maybe I'm being too academic about it, but I feel like what's lost in there is a cohesive narrative thread as you go through the movie in favor of action sequences. And so that turns this into an action movie, not a thought-provoking movie. And I don't know that Trek has to be a lost in its own head kind of story where you can get excessive navel gazing. But I do think it's at its best when it's exploring the human condition. And this didn't do that. It didn't explore it. It told us an action story, and then at the end of that action story, it used the human condition as an excuse for why things are the way they are. And it didn't give us room to explore it. Like, why was the character like he was? What drove him to that stance? If you're not able to tell it with that character, then you need to be able to tell it with parallels to that character in other parts of the narrative as it went through. But they didn't. Maybe I'm missing it. Maybe I'm just not smart enough to catch the events that occurred that were talking about that throughout the rest of the movie. But the narrative as the story goes through never felt like it was covering the topic of the movie. Like in the idea of the hero's journey, you have the set out for a reason because the status quo has been upset. You go to resolve this, but there's like we didn't get that set up. There was a sort of call to adventure. But the adventure wasn't what they set out to do. They set out to help somebody. They thought this captain who requested their help to catch her crew that was taken by Kroll or whatever his name was. That person dies, I think, when we're still in the first act, after the ship gets destroyed, the Enterprise gets destroyed. She she still sides with the villain, gets herself into a situation where she's still trying to kill the good guys. She gets crushed when the ship flips over on her. She's gone. Doesn't matter anymore. Like, arguably, it didn't matter at all in the first place. Like, there's no part of her appearance and actions within the story that could not have been handled by a distress beacon being sent from the system, the Enterprise going in to help with the distress call. She never has to appear. She did not matter. So why is she in there? If you use her to tell the narrative of a person who's going to set up the same problems that we see in the villain of the episode, and then give her that option for redemption and she doesn't take it, that's a topic of exploring the concept through the rest of the narrative. But we don't get that thread. There's no through thread for that argument. The thesis statement of this movie is there is no thesis statement of this movie. And I think that's a missed Star Trek aspect. Because in my mind, without that in this movie, this just becomes a beat 'em up, blow 'em up action movie, dressed in some of the trappings of a Star Trek movie, where you have the philosophical point tacked onto it so it looks like it's a Star Trek concept, but it didn't cover it. I feel like, I think I'm probably rambling too far at this point. I need to let it go. I do feel like the second movie was better about it. The second movie had more through narrative. The first movie had some through narrative. I do think overall the series, if I'm looking for a through narrative on a philosophical point, doesn't meet the grade. And that's fine if that's the type of Star Trek movie you're used to and you want. That's not my type of Star Trek movie that I'm familiar with and comfortable with and enjoy about the Star Trek franchise. So it seems dissonant to me. And I guess part of the part of the signaling I should have gotten early on was, we're breaking from Star Trek tradition by breaking the timeline and doing our own thing. And I should be able to embrace that. It's just hard for me to break away from a Star Trek movie is to these new Star Trek movies are, and not have like the brand name of Star Trek make it feel so dissonant for this to be how they do it. And I think that's my shortcoming on this one. I think overall they're good action movies. I feel like you could have done these as anything other than a Star Trek and they wouldn't be harmed at all. You could set every one of these stories in Star Wars, in Star Trek, Babylon 5. You could set them on, what are some of the other science fiction series that I used to watch? You could almost do some of these in the Lost in Space universe from the movies Lost in Space. Like, there's nothing binding them to Star Trek. And I feel like that's a disservice to the Star Trek franchise. And it's a disservice to these movies. Because I would say, if you made these movies their own universe and just didn't use any of the other universes, they'd be pretty good. And they're fairly decent movies. And they're a fun adventure. And the moments that bother me would probably feel brilliant for what they are in another franchise. But I'm having a hard time judging them on that score because they call themselves Star Trek. I don't know if that makes any sense to anybody out there. I've rambled way too long for this. We've got one more Star Trek themed thing a week from tonight, and that will be the Please Stand By story. And then hopefully between then and now, I do something else. But if not, I will have another couple of videos on here because I want to do some other video stuff. The 1 minute reviews, but I also want to do top 10 lists of some of my favorite books and movies. And discussions of some of the stories within some of those. So I will try to get some of that going in the next week or two. We'll see how my life cooperates. But until then, I will see you next week. Live long and prosper, I guess.